Back to Miller. Oh, my goodness.
Herbert.
Sidearm sling, and it's a touchdown.
Tyrese Maxey.
Oh, good spin move by Filipowski for the news. Give him 9.
All right. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Beef Up Front College Football Show here on Pick Swap Media. Your host, Ryan Coyle, joined alongside Joe Kmetz, as always, for our weekly college football preview, where we'll be giving you the best 5 games as well as the best group of 5 game, and we'll be breaking those down in depth, giving you our picks against the spread, over, under. But before we get into this week, we had one of the best college football Saturdays in recent memory last weekend, a great slate of games, and just kind of want to recap that a little bit first. So welcome back, Joe. How are we? And what were your thoughts on some of the games last weekend?
Coyle, I'm very good. Thank you as always for having me. And that was the weekend that, like, you know, as college football fans, like, that we wait for. It was a great weekend. We learned a lot of things about a lot of teams. You know, we got to see the most talked about team in the country kind of get humbled a little bit. We got to see, it was one of the most viewed games, I think the second most viewed game in NBC history for college football with, let's try that again. No, there we go. Notre Dame and Ohio State, gut-wrenching ending for my Irish, but just an awesome, like, classic college football game. Florida State really just kind of put their nuts on the table, and in the preseason, we, talked about, how we're going to have a September to, remember. They go 4-0. They beat LSU and Clemson. They give themselves a lot of breathing room in the ACC, especially now. And Clemson, the biggest surprise, Clemson 0-2 in the ACC, something that we didn't expect. We had Bama, kind of Nick Saban was like, this is still Alabama, beat Ole Miss. Wazoo, I said this on Twitter. I wish I knew they were wearing the black uniforms before we recorded, because I would have completely flipped my pick. But Wazoo looks really good. And all of a sudden, in a Pac-12 where they don't play USC like we were talking about last week, Wazoo all of a sudden is a real contender for the conference title. A lot of great games. We could do a whole show just recapping last week, but we obviously got to move forward. College football doesn't stop. We're recording on Tuesday night. I think we got games. I think we have a game Wednesday night this week. If not this week, next week. I know Conference USA is kind of copying the MAC, doing some midweek games. So, that's I'm right up my alley, so I can't wait for that. But, yeah, let's get right into this week.
Yeah, it's wild, though. This is already week 5. Like, season's got to slow down. Like, this
is our 6th show, including this show. It's insane.
It is pretty wild. Just to put the final nail, I guess, in the coffin for last week's great games, I want to give myself a pat on the back. I said, don't be afraid to sprinkle Cam Ward for Heisman plus or 100-1. He's now up to 45-1 after that great performance last week against Oregon State. So still a bit of a long shot there, but if you sprinkled, even if you still want to sprinkle now, if Wazoo continues to pull off these upsets, they're going to be in the top 10, knocking on the door right there. It's going to be, I think, a Pac-12 quarterback, though, at the end of the day that wins the Heisman. Most likely going to be Williams or Penix, but Cam Ward's right in there, too. If they can knock some people off, and who knows, you said maybe the Cinderella story was happening in Oregon State. Maybe it's happening at Wazoo. So that'll be something kind of fun to watch going forward. Just to recap last week real quick, our record-wise, we actually had, I think this has to be for the first time ever, the exact same total record. I went 12-7-2, 6-1 straight up, 3-3-1 against the spread, and 3-3-1 total. So those are for our official records. And then 0-1 on my dog of the day, which was San Diego State. They wound up covering that 7-point spread. So that's kind of like a half win, I guess. And then 0-1 on my lock of the week of under 38 or whatever it was in Minnesota Northwestern. I mean, first of all, just to get that game out of the way, Northwestern coming back, I think after being down 3 touchdowns maybe in the fourth quarter against Minnesota. Not a good look right there. But whatever my lock is this week, we'll get into that at the end. Just make sure to fade that because I think I've lost 4 in a row now. Then, like I said, you had the same record, 12-7-2. You went 5-2 straight up, 3-3-1 against the spread, 4-2-1 in the total after really struggling back-to-back weeks. There you go. Get on the right side. 0-1 on your dog of the day with Bowling Green, but 1-0 on your lock of the week, moving to 4 in a row. And I know before the show you were a little hesitant about what your lock of the week is going to be this week, so make sure to stay tuned to the end of the episode to see if Joe can go for his 5th straight lock of the week. All right, this week, I just looked it up. Games actually don't start till Thursday, but our coverage starts on Friday. One of the games of the year in the Pac-12, as we talked about last episode, just such an awesome conference this year. It feels like each and every week we're going to have a major Pac-12 game on the show. Number 10, Utah at number 19, Oregon State. Utah coming off that great win, defensive win over UCLA, and Oregon State coming off that shootout loss to Washington State. Oregon State is a 3-point favorite at home here. Over-under is 45. This will be a 9 o'clock Eastern kickoff on FS1. Joe, who wins this one, the Utes or the Beavers?
So I got the Beavers here 24-20. So I'm going to take a -3. I'm going to take the under 45, even though I have it pretty close there. I just can't back down on Oregon State after getting bold last week and saying that they could be playing for the conference title. Especially being able to come back to Corvallis after a great game. I mean, that was one of those games where if that game's, at Oregon State, they probably come away with it with Washington State. Wazoo looked awesome. I think that's a huge win for them. But throwing that game aside, I'm still a believer in DJ. He's a lot more comfortable now without the shadow of Dabo and Clemson. And I mean, Utah on the road, Utah's won games with their defense, but the offense still hasn't really impressed me. And I don't really know if they have the firepower. I know I'm saying a 24-20 game talking about firepower, but I just don't know if Utah really is going to have the offense to go on the road. We saw them almost lose to Baylor on the road, who Baylor, it's looking like, is a really bad team. We'll get to them a little bit later potentially, but I'm going to take the Beavers here 24-20. I do. I think they're going to win a low-scoring game, big win. Corvallis is going to be rocking on a Friday night, get a top 10 win, and get right back into the race. If there was ever a year a 2-loss team could make the college football playoff in its current format, it might be this year out of the Pac-12 just because of how loaded the conference is. Last week there were 8 ranked teams. This week there's 6. And I think UCLA was right outside, receiving votes. So, I mean, really loaded conference. We're going to be talking about these teams the rest of the way because there's just going to be so many great games.
Yeah, that Oregon State Wazoo game, that was the 3rd game on at the bar with Penn State and Notre Dame. But that was one, it feels like every time you panned your eyes to it, they were going and scoring a touchdown. But, I mean, where else would you rather be than on a Friday night than Corvallis, Oregon, right, Joe?
Nowhere. I'm gonna get an Airbnb out there, Coyle. Let's fly out there Friday night.
I'm going to go with a low-scoring affair here too, but I'm going to take the Utes on the road, 21-17 outright win. So I'm going to go Utah +3 and under 45. I think this is a matchup between two teams who, on an ideal day, when they're controlling the tempo, they play a similar style of football, low-scoring. Oregon State, they showed last week, I think, that they can go out there and put up points if they need to. But they want to win games in these lower scoring type of affairs because we saw last week they might not necessarily have that firepower to wind up winning those high scoring games. And they might find themselves in some of these battles with these loaded quarterbacks in the Pac-12. So I think if they're able to control the pace more and keep games lower scoring, that's going to be better off for them going forward. But that plays right into Utah's hands, especially this week. I mean, the defense has been so good so far this year for Utah. Oregon State showed they can put up 35 points, but Utah proved, I think, that their defense is the real deal and has to start to be discussed as a top 5 defense in the sport. We'll see them get tested more and more going forward against some of these better quarterbacks. But they held UCLA to only 7 points in that game. That lowered the season average to only allowing 9.5 points per game. That's 6th best in the country. UCLA going into that game, Joe, hadn't scored less than 27 in their 3 games played. And then Utah just went out there and from the start, pick 6 on the first play. And after that, it was kind of just domination from there on. And on top of that, it sounds like more and more like Cam Rising is getting ready to return to action. Thought he was going to return last week, but I think this week could be the week. And after this game, Utah does still have to play Oregon, USC, and Washington. So this defense will get put to the test more and more going throughout the season. And Rising is going to have to elevate his play and the offense's play because the offense, like you were saying, hasn't really lit the world on fire. They've really been carried by this defense. Rising is certainly going to add a different element, but he's coming off a major ACL injury. He's going to be rusty. So it's going to be a bit of a test, but I think no matter if he plays in this game or not, I think the defense is so good right now. And I think last week's a bit of a emotional letdown type game, losing to Wazoo in that one when they were a favorite. So I think Oregon State's still a good team in its own right, and they have 5 games in a row after this where they should be favored. But I just think Utah has shown that they can be trusted more, and the defense is just going to keep them in every single game. So this game's really a coin flip, but I will take the Utes on the road here. Outright win, +3 and under 45. All right, we go to Saturday now. Number 8, USC, traveling to, you heard it here once again, Colorado, back on the show. A 12 o'clock kickoff on Fox. USC minus 21.5, over under 73.5. Is this a 9 a.m. body clock game out there?
For USC, it will be. I think Colorado 10 o'clock. I believe they're Mountain.
Still.
Yeah, still.
What time do you get to the stadium for that one?
You're probably walking in at like 9. You're probably the football players are.
That's what I'm saying. The players.
I was thinking tailgating. That just shows where I'm at. Players probably get in the stadium at like 7. You're probably that was like back during COVID, Coyle. I think it was USC Arizona State. It was a noon kick, and I remember like it was like, oh, the itinerary was like the players are waking up at 3:55 in the morning. It's like, why even go to sleep then? Just stay up. Like it's crazy. This is the only thing I don't like about like TV networks kind of like controlling college football now. Fox wanted this to be the big noon kickoff. Gus Johnson basically lives in Boulder now. I think he's called like all of their games so far, or if not all, most like the ones that have been on Fox. I don't know. This is USC 59, Colorado 28. I'll take USC minus 21.5, over 73.5. I just think, and this isn't an indictment on Deion. Like they're a solid team. They're just not a great team, and that's okay. People out there like. Because there's obviously, as you've seen on social media, there's 2 polar sides. There's the, oh my God, Deion, Colorado, like FanDuel put out that tweet. It was like, who would you favor, 2019 LSU or Colorado? Like, what are we doing? This was after they beat Colorado State. They were 3-0. Like, grow up. I mean, get serious. Colorado's a solid team. They're probably going to make a bowl game. That is an amazing achievement of itself. But the media had to keep shoving down our throats that, oh, Deion is the greatest team ever, all this stuff. They're not that good, and it's okay. They're not an elite team. They're a good team. They're probably going to go 6-6, 7-5. The Pac-12
is a huge success.
Yes, they won 1 game last year. You're going to increase that by 5 or 6 wins? That's insane. Deion's probably deservedly going to get Coach of the Year just because of this. Like, you got a team. Colorado was such an afterthought last year. They've been an afterthought for years. Ever since they went to the Pac-12, they had like 1 year, I think, they made it to the conference title game, but not a lot of analysis on the game itself, obviously, as you can tell. But I just think USC is the better team. I think they're going to kind of go in, and it's going to be kind of similar to the Oregon game. USC is going to take, the lead early. I think they're going to go up 2-3 scores. Colorado is going to try to play catch-up. The Colorado offensive line got exposed going up against a real D-line now. Shedeur, I believe, got sacked 7 times. Could be wrong off the top of my head. I believe that was the number. Shedeur came back down to earth as well. A lot of people were, he's still a very good quarterback, but he got to play a real defense. And if Travis Hunter's still hurt, that doesn't help either. I mean, your best player not being able to play isn't great. I think Caleb Williams is not going to struggle. They'll let Colorado score a couple points because that's just how USC's defense is. But I think USC is going to win this game comfortably. We won't see USC in trouble in the Pac-12 until, I don't know their actual schedule off the top of my head, but you're at a game at Cowboy and they were tied in the fourth quarter. USC will always have that one random Pac-12 game. I just don't think it's this one.
Yeah, and the more I look at this, I would never take the under in a USC game just because it wouldn't surprise me too if Lincoln Riley wants to be an asshole and keep his foot on the gas and they go out and put up 73 points themselves. It wouldn't surprise me, but the more I think the first half under in this game might be the play, a 9 a.m. kick for USC body clock time and Colorado 10 a.m. I mean, I assume the coaches have them up practicing at 6 a.m. this week just to get prepared, ready, waking up early or whatever. But that's got to be something I feel like you got to look into. So
Almost like, I don't mean to cut you off, Coyle, like during March Madness when like the West Coast teams play out East and they like you, it's almost like automatic. The first half unders are always like going to hit. Like that's actually a really good call. That might be something I have to hop on. That might be my lock of the week now.
yeah, so first half total in this game is 38.5. Just a little in favor of the under at minus 115 on DraftKings. So, all right, let's make that a play, Joe. Under 38.5 in the first half. Colorado USC, the body clock game. That's what we're gonna do. That's our play for this game. But I'll just get into my kind of take on this game real quick. I'll go USC to win outright, of course, here. 51-24. USC minus 21.5 and over 73.5. Back-to-back weeks, we've had a team on the show, and they're a 21-point or more dog. This might be the last time we see Colorado unless they're able to surprise, but I don't really know after last week. For once, I feel like that we're recording and that they're not the main talking point, but here we are kind of already probably 4 or 5 minutes into talking about them. Oregon took them, though, to domination station last week. I think we knew that they would get pushed around against some of these upper echelon teams that have been recruiting at a much higher level for the past 5 or so years and just have much more depth on this roster. And Colorado, as we saw, they just don't have the beef up front on this roster right now and the same level of talent from top to bottom. So I think that's where this game is a separator too. USC is in that upper echelon that Oregon is. It's not TCU, who we know they went to the national title last year, but that's still not an NFL factory type team. Nebraska, they've played. Colorado State. Last week was the first like big boy game they played, and we saw them get pushed around because they lack that beef up front, and they just don't have that talent and that depth that Oregon has and that Oregon's been building. Could they be there in a year or two if Deion stays? I certainly think so. But at the same time, right now, that's just not what this team is. Oregon wasn't slowed down at all, put up 35 in the first half. And I think they took the foot off the gas in the second half. They didn't want to show too much. And it's not going to get easier this week. As you said, Travis Hunter's still out. Now you're facing Caleb Williams and USC, who have put up 42 or more in every game so far, and they're averaging 569 yards per game on offense. I just don't think Colorado has the horses to slow these guys down just yet. But I do want to see some more from this offense. Shedeur is getting all this hype. Got destroyed last week due to his offensive line play. Is he able to overcome that this week against a USC defense that just allowed 28 to a rebuilding Arizona State program? We'll see what that looks like, but I'm never going to take an under with Caleb Williams and Lincoln Riley in the game, so I'll go USC 51, Colorado 24 just for the sake of the picks. I'm not going to bet the total for the game, but I will take that first half under of 38.5. That's going to be the beef play of the week, our dual play. All right, we go to the Big 12 now. Number 24, Kansas coming in undefeated at number 3, Texas. 3:30 kick on ABC. Texas is a 17-point favorite. Over under is 62.
So I'm going to take Texas here 38-25. So I'm going to take Kansas to cover. I'm going to take the over just barely. But the first thing that stands out to me in this game, I just love how like normal it is. Like that you like weren't like, oh my God, Kansas is 24. Like, oh yeah, Kansas now is just a top 25 team. Lance Leipold has really turned it around there. I think he's doing a great job of that program. And owners, I'm going to take Kansas to cover here. Texas is the better team, in my opinion. But, look ahead spot a little bit for Texas. They have the Red River rivalry game next week. Automatic overplay every year in that game.
Last year when it was like 50-0, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was. I think Texas won, 49-9. Not great. But ironically enough, the last 2 times these teams have played in Austin, Texas, that's what I was looking up here. I'm on Winsipedia. Texas won the game by 2 points. I believe that was the game they kicked a game-winning field goal, or maybe Kansas missed a game-winning field goal, one of the two. And then the year after, or the next time they played in 2021, Kansas won 57-56. That was the year they went for 2. I think that was like Les Miles' last year coaching there. I could be wrong, but that was when Kansas still was, the Kansas football you think about. So the last 2 times they played in Austin, Kansas has either won outright or it's been really close. So even though those games have nothing to do with this year's game, those are the reasons why I'm going to take Kansas plus 17. I do love the Jayhawks. I think, just looking at the Big 12 is pretty down this year. Jayhawks could actually be a sneaky contender to make the conference title game. That team is going to go as far as Daniels takes them. but Texas is the better team here. We saw them struggle a little bit with the Wyoming after the big Alabama win. I think they're just gonna kind of be in control with this one. Kansas will, stay within the number for the most part, but the game is never really going to be in doubt. Give me the Longhorns.
I'm going to go Texas big in this one, 44-21. So Texas minus 17 over 62. I'm expecting this one to be some fireworks on offense. Two teams that are very prolific offenses. We've seen both teams have scored at least 30 points every week, and both are sitting at 4-0. So these teams are going to, I think, live and die with their offenses. But Texas's defense has been really good this year as well. But both teams have dominated in the games that they've won. Texas has an average margin of victory of 22.5 points per game. And Kansas has played much more contested games, but they're still winning by an average margin of 15 points per game. Might be a little bit exaggerated by that 31-point victory they had in week 1 over Missouri State. But still, these are two teams that are winning by at least 2 touchdowns every week so far. Now we can kind of see we already kind of know, I think, what Texas is. It's more so a measuring stick game for Kansas. But Texas, my thing with them is I still think they might be due for a slip-up sometime. Is this game potential one? I'm not sure with it being at home. But, I think we know what Texas is at their peak. And that at number 3 in the country right now, that's a legit title contender. So I'm really more so interested to see what Kansas does in this one, because last year they started out 5-0, but then they finished 2-7 once Big 12 play got going. I know Daniels was hurt down the stretch, but let's see if this year's different. I remember last year when I had this cornhole tournament and they had the big game versus TCU. The first time game day went to Lawrence, and then TCU beat them, and they kind of sputtered down the stretch after that. So this is another one where if they do lose this game, do they kind of fall off a cliff after that? Or can they kind of sustain this and be an 8-9 win team? If you're doing that at Kansas football, just like we're kind of seeing at Duke, which we'll get into a little bit, if you're winning 9 games at Duke and Kansas on the football field, combined with everything you already do with basketball, that's a major win. So really interested to see how Kansas fares against this Texas team. Like I said, I do think Texas might be in for a slip up at some point, but I think if that does come around, it will be on the road. So I'm going to take Texas to win this one and cover and the over to hit. But I'm interested for this one, a measuring stick game, I think, for both teams. Is Texas really that good that they can blow out another undefeated team, or is Kansas good enough to kind of hang around and make this one close and stay within the number like you said? But for our pick's sake, Texas minus 17 over 62. All right. Off the path of our Big 5 games of the week, we'll go to our G5 game of the week, where last week we didn't have one of these just because of the loaded slate we had, already having 7 games on the show. So we're getting back to it this week. 2-2 Boise State at 3-1 Memphis, a 4 o'clock kickoff on ESPN2. Memphis is a 3.5-point home favorite here. Over under is 59.5. Joe, what are your thoughts on this game? I believe this was a 8-9 matchup in the NCAA tournament a few years back.
Yeah, I believe it was. I think that was Memphis won, because I believe this was when the Mountain West went 0-4 in like the first 5 hours of the tournament. It was like all 4 of their teams were knocked out by the end of the first day, and it was a catastrophe. But because I'm pretty sure I think I had all 4 teams advancing. But I'm going to go Memphis in this one, 41-35. Boise State, and I know because of the fact that they're not a Power 5 team, they won't be put in this category. But if they do lose this game, they might end up being one of the most disappointing teams in the country. I was very high on Boise coming into the season. I know we talked about them week 1 when they went to Washington. Now, Washington looks like the station, don't get me wrong. But Boise got shellacked in that game, and I was very, very surprised. Then they lost to UCF on a field goal as time expired at home. They played 2 cupcakes the last 2 weeks, to get themselves back to 2-2. But this is a very good Memphis football team. Memphis, they are averaging, I believe, like 440 yards a game. I looked before we recorded. I should have wrote the number down. But pretty good offense. And a Memphis team, though, that I do have their schedule pulled up here on my phone. If they win this game, they give themselves an inside track at the New Year's 6 G5 representative, because they host Tulane in a couple of weeks. They have a bye next week. That's like their toughest team left they have on their schedule, and they get them at home. They also get SMU coming to them, a team that's going to be in the ACC next year, which makes me want to puke. But Memphis kind of getting the 2 biggest teams in their conference coming to them. That's very big in a dwindling American Athletic Conference. All the powers that be have left to the Big 12. But very big opportunity here for Memphis on a national stage to get a very big home win. I think the Liberty Bowl is going to be rocking. Give me the Tigers.
I'm going to go with Memphis too, 34-31. Don't really have a great read on this game, so I'll thread the needle there with taking Memphis straight up, but I'll take Boise to cover that 3.5-point spread and over 59.5. Boise State, though, Joe, you're saying that you're a little bit disappointed in them. They've challenged themselves in the non-conference. I know you're touching on Washington, going 0-2 against Washington and UCF, but I think that is going to fare well for them down the stretch in conference play. And this isn't a layup out-of-conference game either, so Memphis losing to Mizzou last week, 34-27. Previous years, you'd be like, not so great because Memphis is kind of one of these better American teams usually. But I think Missouri, after beating Kansas State too, they're in for maybe like an 8-win season. But Memphis had a cakewalk pretty much with their other 3 opponents. So I think we're going to get a good kind of measuring stick-wise for these teams, see where they stand in their conferences going forward potentially. Looking at the odds on DraftKings to win the conference, the American Memphis has the 3rd best odds at plus 380, and Boise State has the 3rd best odds to win the Mountain West at plus 260. So 2 pretty evenly matched squads. I'm going to take the home team here to win straight up, but like I said, thread the needle with Boise plus 3.5. I think the difference in this one is Memphis's offense against Boise State's defense. Boise's allowing 430 yards per game, and they're facing a Memphis team that likes to play up-tempo and get a lot of plays, and they average 436.8 yards per game on offense. That's 39th most in the country. And they're on the 34th most plays per game as well. So they want to get, 80 to 90 snaps if they can each and every week. I think the tempo is going to be a little bit too much for this Boise defense. That's not really particularly a strong unit right now to handle. And I think the Tigers are going to get this win. All right, we go back to our Big 5 games. We go to the SEC now for our second to last game of the week. Number 13, LSU, traveling to number 20, Ole Miss, 6 o'clock on ESPN. LSU is a 2.5-point favorite. Over-under is 63.5.
I'm going to go LSU here pretty big, 38-27. So I'm going to take them to cover the 2.5. I'm going to take the over 63.5. I just think LSU is really good, and I think Ole Miss kind of got exposed as they're a good, not great team. Like they're going to be an 8-4, maybe a 9-3 type of team. But Ole Miss going to Bama last week, they kind of got exposed. They didn't really play, that many great. Like their biggest win was Tulane without Tulane starting quarterback. Ole Miss coming home, and it's going to be a game. I'd probably take Ole Miss to cover that first half spread. I could even see them being up at halftime, but I just think LSU, if we're talking about the inconsistency of Daniels, last week they were in a dogfight at home against Arkansas, coming off of a big blowout against Mississippi State. I could see this week LSU going into Oxford and, taking care of business. And LSU, even though they lost that first game to Florida State, people, they kind of fell off the radar, at least as much as an SEC team can. They're very much alive in the SEC race. Haven't lost a conference game yet, obviously. This could be a big step going forward, especially with an Alabama team that an Alabama and LSU play. It's going to basically be a playoff game, considering the fact that both teams already have one loss. I think LSU is really, really good. I think Ole Miss, like I said, they're good, not great. Them getting LSU at home is big. I just don't think it's going to be enough of a difference. Give me the Tigers here by 11.
I'm on the other side as you. You're giving me points here at home. I'm going to take them for this Ole Miss team that I think last week they just kind of were in a no-win situation going to Bama, playing that desperate of a Bama team. I'm going to take Ole Miss to win this one outright at home, kind of going with my same mantra that I had for the Wazoo-Oregon State game where home dog in this one at less than 3 points. I think that's a good play there. So give me Ole Miss 34, LSU 31. So Ole Miss plus 2.5 and over 63.5. I think, though, by kickoff, I think we could see this move a little bit. And if not, what I did last week for the Notre Dame game, I was glad. It was 3 at kickoff. I moved it to 3.5 at like minus 125 instead. I might do that for this one if it's at like 3, maybe move it to 3.5 just to kind of play it safe because I wound up, benefiting from that, getting the win instead of the push ultimately at the end. So, but back to kind of the Ole Miss game last week, they walked into a near impossible situation, I think, going to Bama as their last home game was a loss. They never lose 2 home games in a season, let alone in back-to-back games. And despite only scoring 10 points, they still had 301 yards of offense. Not exactly lighting the world on fire for some college football teams, but still 301 yards. They were able to move the ball. They just weren't really able to convert on third down. I think that's where they were struggling. See if they can do better this week. But they get a much easier matchup, Ole Miss does, on defense this week with LSU. They gave up 31 points to Arkansas last week, gave up 45 to Florida State, and those are the best two teams that LSU has played. Now they're getting an Ole Miss team that's coming off a poor performance. You know that they're going to be trying to fine-tune some things this week during practice and really try and get back into that flow and try and get Jackson Dart back on that potential dark horse Heisman kind of ticket that I had him on. So if he has a big game here and they right the ship, they still have a chance to win the SEC West if some chaos goes on down the stretch. But even if they don't win the West, Joe, do you think it's crazy if they win out and they beat Georgia? They'll have to obviously beat Georgia to win out this season, but they'll be 11-1. They're going to be favored in every single game, I think, going forward, heading into that Georgia game. And you're sitting there at 11-1. Obviously, it'll depend on what happens ahead of you, but do you still think there's a path there to the playoffs for Ole Miss, even if Alabama wins out and wins the SEC West?
I mean, for sure. That's, the beauty of the SEC. You get a great schedule. And like you said, if they were to win out, sitting there, 11-1, I mean, there's no reason why they can't sneak in. I mean, we saw with Ohio State didn't even win the division last year, and they snuck in and got that 4 spot. So there's no reason why not, especially in the SEC. If this was like the Big 12, I would say probably not. But being 11-1 in the SEC is like being undefeated in basically almost any other conference. So yeah, there's for sure a path.
Because they would knock off Georgia and then just say Bama beat Georgia in the SEC title game. You're not going to put in a 2-loss Georgia team and then a 1-loss Ole Miss team that only lost to Alabama at Alabama. I mean, I still think there is a path for them. Certainly an uphill climb, but they have to get this one if they want any chance of it. So I think they're in desperation mode. They know it, and I'm much lower on this LSU team than you. I don't think that they're that great of a bunch. When they're playing at their peak, they can be, but I think they're going to be a team that's really up and down with their consistency this year, and I think that hurts them on the road in an SEC game here. So I'm going to go Jackson Dart, 300-plus yards, Ole Miss, outright win. Let's cash another home dog here, plus 2.5. Take him straight up on the money line. Love the home dog with the points, so let's keep it rolling, Rebels. All right, final game of the week. Number 11, Notre Dame, coming off a heartbreaker to Ohio State. At number 17, Duke. College game day going to this one, 7:30 on ABC. Notre Dame is a 5.5-point favorite. Over under is 50.
Going Notre Dame here, 31-24. So I'm going to take a minus the 5.5. I'm going to pick the over. I definitely will stay away from that in terms of gambling in real life. But I think Notre Dame gets the bounce back here. I mean, that's just a gut-wrenching. Just watching that game and watching Notre Dame when they stuffed Ohio State on 4th and inches, like the game, Notre Dame had that game won, picked up a first down with Estime, and then all of a sudden, weird option play doesn't work, pass play doesn't work. Now all of a sudden, instead of doing 2 inside runs and maybe facing 3rd and 5, 3rd and 6, you're not facing 3rd and 15. Obviously, punt away to Ohio State. The rest is history. Frank the Tank, heartbroken once again. The Fleming curse lives on. But Sam Hartman, the reason why Notre Dame brought him in was for these big games. He only had 175 yards passing. I think he's going to have a big bounce back this week playing against a school that he's familiar with in Duke. And I'm sorry. Like, I get Duke had the big win against – I just see Duke getting this win as well. Then all of a sudden we're talking about a Duke football in the playoffs. I just don't see that happening. I think Notre Dame is the better team. I think Marcus Freeman's going to step up here. Notre Dame still has a lot of meat on the bone with their schedule, especially with the ACC kind of being what it is this year, kind of having a little bit of a resurgence. The next 3 games for them, there's a chance we could be talking about them on all 3 shows. Duke this week. Next week, they're at Louisville. That game is already 7:30 ABC. So Notre Dame on ABC back-to-back weeks. And then the game at home, 7:30 against USC in a couple of weeks. And Louisville, if they win this week, Louisville is going to be a top 25 team. So a lot of meat on the bone for Notre Dame. I think they get it started here. They get back on track here. Gritty win for the Irish going to Duke. but give me the Irish to cover and win this game by 7.
What was my main point about Ole Miss?
They're doing it?
Home dogs, baby.
Love your home dog.
I love the home dogs. I'm taking Duke again, plus 5.5 here. But I'm going to say keep the points as well, and Duke gets the outright victory, 23-20. So Duke plus 5.5 and under 50. I just think last week, Joe, we know I was a big Notre Dame supporter going into this year. They were making me look good, making me look smart. And then we had them last week. We had them so close, and they let us down. I think I was let down, and I'm not even a Notre Dame fan. I was just trying to look smart. That's just such a heartbreaking way to lose. Can they bounce back? I mean, it feels like this is just such an emotional hangover type spot. I don't know if they can answer the bell. They went out. They're still right there in the conversation for the playoff because I think this Duke team is probably going to be 8-4, 9-3. Clemson, say what you want about them at 2-2. They had a very good chance to beat Florida State last week. They should still probably be an 8-10 win team. And then they still have USC on the schedule, who should be a 10 win team as well. And then you're saying the Louisville game too. I mean, this is still a Notre Dame team with plenty of games to play for and type spots to get back into the conversation. So it's can Marcus Freeman get these guys ready to go and bounce back from that emotional loss? I'm just going to say no. I think it was too much. I think Duke is a legit team. I had them in that week 1 game against Clemson, and you're giving me the points at home again. I'm going to take the Blue Devils. College game day here. That was my whole sticking point in that initial game against Clemson on that Monday night, where it was, this might be the biggest game in Duke football history at home. Now you got another chance at it against Notre Dame, and you can potentially end their season with College game day there. I mean, that's a huge game for that program. Let's see if they can do it again. I think this one with the Irish coming to town, I think it's going to be an awesome atmosphere down there. But I think it's also going to be a very similar game to Notre Dame, Ohio State, and we see it in kind of a lower scoring, down to the wire type battle. But I think the emotions of last game are too big to overcome, and we see Duke step up to the plate here and get a win outright, 23-20. So obviously plus 5.5 and under 50 there. Duke football ends Notre Dame's season.
Really quick, Coyle, before we get into the dogs, I will say if Notre Dame loses this game, kind of like I was making the positive points about Notre Dame's schedule, they lose this game, this season could spiral very quickly because the last place you would want to go on a 2-game losing streak is to a hungry Louisville team, especially if Louisville is 5-0. Because everything you just said about Duke, how this would be the biggest home game ever for them, this would be a huge home game for Louisville, especially to get that national recognition in the ACC race. Just wanted to get that point out there before I forgot about it and thought about it before going to bed, be like, that would have been a great thing to talk about on the show.
All right, now we go into our dog of the day and our lock of the week. We'll start with the dog of the day. Joe, I see yours on the document right now, and this was one I was eyeing up as well. Let's hear your dog of the day here.
So I'm going Syracuse here. Syracuse +7, +235 on the money line on DraftKings. They are hosting Clemson. It feels like, even though this game is not a rivalry, whenever these teams play, something weird always happens. I feel like Syracuse +7 will, I was considering making that my lock as well, but I didn't really like a lot of the dogs outside of the dog that Coyle's going to get into in a little bit. But I'm taking Syracuse here for my dog of the day. Clemson, kind of like how I was just saying about Notre Dame having to potentially go to Louisville, coming off of 2 losses. Clemson team in an emotional hangover type of spot. You missed the game-winning field goal in regulation with the kicker. They talked about way too much because he was a walk-on. It was like we were texting about it, Coyle. You would have thought like this kid like saved the human race. How much they were talking about him. And losing in overtime to Florida State in a game where Clemson's all of a sudden looking at themselves 0-2. A game that I said last week boldly that Dabo might lose the fan base. I mean, you might be losing your team with 2, losses like that in conference opponents. Now you have to go all the way north to Syracuse on a Saturday afternoon. The Carrier Dome or whatever they call it now is going to be rocking.
Syracuse is playing well too.
Yeah, Syracuse undefeated, but Syracuse does this every year, and then they play Clemson, and like last year they were undefeated or maybe had one loss going into the Clemson game. They lost, and then their season kind of spiraled. Kind of like how you were talking about with Kansas earlier. If Syracuse can win this game, now all of a sudden we got to start talking about the Orange as possible ACC contenders. A lot of moving parts in the ACC still, with a lot of teams with very good records early on. So give me Syracuse, though. The home magic, like I said, whenever they play Clemson at home, weird stuff always happens. So if you're not going to take them outright, definitely take them plus the 7.
Yeah, I got the +7 already circled on my card, and this was one of the ones I was looking at as my potential dog of the day as well. But as I got further and further down the schedule, I had to go back to last year's miracle play. I'm going back to the well. South Carolina +12.5 coming into this one, +400 on the money line. The Gamecocks taking down Tennessee. Got to run it back with this one after last year. 23-point dog. Hammered that one on the money line last year. That was probably the best gambling win of my entire life. I think South Carolina, though, going back to this year's team, showed a lot of grit in that Georgia game, showed that they can kind of compete with some of these tougher teams. And Tennessee, I think they showed that they're soft with that performance against Florida. This isn't the same Tennessee team that was around last year. That was one of the better teams in the country for most of the season. And I also think coming into this game, South Carolina has seen a lot more and is more battle-tested. Played a very good North Carolina team. They've played Georgia so far. They just beat Mississippi State last week, who not necessarily is going to be a great team, but still it's an SEC opponent. Tennessee really struggled against Florida. They didn't really dominate Austin Peay. Well, the only team that they dominated so far this year was Virginia in that week 1 game, and that's not saying much at all. So this is the call the shot type play, the miracle. Let's throw a dart at the board here and try to hit a bullseye. South Carolina +400 on the money line, +12.5 on the spread. Definitely like that play. All right, lock of the week, Joe. Take us away. You go for 5 in a row. Can you do it?
I'm going for 5 straight. The pressure's on. I admittedly was looking at the board. Even, when Coyle and I hopped on the call right before we started recording, I picked this basically as we started recording the show. I'm going UCF -11.5 hosting the Baylor Bears. Already placed the bet, already locked in. My lock of the week, I'm going for 5 in a row. UCF, their first ever Big 12 home game, and they're getting it against the Baylor team who I just think is dead. I feel like in one of the more shocking turns of events, Dave Aranda might be fired at the end of the season. They went from Big 12 champs. Like, they won the Big 12. People, including myself, kind of forget that when you talk about this Baylor team. They had that incredible goal line stop where it seemed like the Oklahoma State running back was running 50 yards to the corner and got stuffed right at the pylon. Kept the Cowboys out of the playoffs, actually. Like, Baylor won the Big 12, and it's crazy just how much they've fallen off. And going on the road to UCF, getting their first ever Big 12 game, the bounce house is going to be rocking. UCF is a team that I actually think is pretty good in the Big 12. I know they had a tough loss going to Kansas State, but I mean, I don't think anyone right now in the country would want to go to go to Manhattan, Kansas on a Saturday to play the Wildcats. So UCF -11.5, going for 5 straight locks.
My lock is going to be out of the Pacific Northwest. I'm going Washington -18 against Arizona. Looking at Washington, they've really been dominant this year. They've won every game by at least 34 points. Nobody can score with this offense right now. Arizona barely squeaked out a 21-20 victory over a Stanford team that's going to be one of, if not the worst Power 5 team when we look back at the end of the season. I think Washington could be in the playoff come the end of the season, depending on what happens in the Pac-12 with some of these teams and these games where they're going to kind of be playing to eliminate each other. But I think just another statement win on the road here. Like I said, they've won every game this year by 34 or more points. So Washington -18 at Arizona here. That's my lock of the week. All right, Joe, any last second comments before we head out? I want to go watch the Phillies clinch a playoff spot.
It must be nice to root for a baseball team that's consistently good. My life is a living hell. I got to see Notre Dame, heartbreaking loss, and then I got to watch Zach Wilson play on a Sunday. So I had a great weekend. Great weekend of games coming up, though. Honestly, as always, everyone enjoy them. It's college football, and you got to savor it because Notre Dame is about to play their 7th game of the season, I believe, or maybe 6th. This is week 5. I lied. Okay, I was getting ahead of myself. But still Notre Dame, as a Notre Dame fan, after Saturday night, I'm going to already have watched half of my team's season because they played in week 0. So you got to savor all the college football you can because this is already our 6th show, and it feels like we just got football back. And I'm not ready to be talking about the halfway point in a couple of weeks. Enjoy it. Like Billy Madison, cherish it. Cherish every second of it.
All right, well, you heard the man. He said it best. As always, everyone, thank you for listening. Please like, subscribe, and we'll talk next week.